Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Dr. Markin Saikia's talk on foreign affairs. Today we are going to discuss a very important issue and a current issue, that is Israel-Palestine conflict or Israel-Hamas war. This conflict started on October 7 and today is November 1st week, right? So what we can see is that this conflict, is about to complete a month. But there is no pause, there is no end in sight. Only we can see violence and violence against children, violence against women, and violence against the most vulnerable people in the war field in the Gaza Strip. So, what is it? What is the current situation in the war? That is what I'm going to discuss today. Instead of going back to the origin of Israel-Palestine conflict, which I am going to bring it to you a new video or lecture on this. So today we'll see what is the current status of the war, how different countries are varying their opinions or their stance at the UN, and what is the stand of the UN so far. We are going to look at that. War so far, if we look at this, at the moment, the US officials, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken, are making all the efforts to release the hostages taken by the Hamas. Meanwhile, Israel has given 3 hours time to the North Gaza citizens to move to South Gaza. It is just unbelievable. Can you believe within 3 hours people can move from their homes? And by the way, why they are going to leave their homes, right? According to a source in the US, already more than 1 million people have left North Gaza. Imagine the pain, imagine the constraints these families must be facing. The health ministry of the Gaza Strip, run by the Hamas, said that more than 9,488 people died so far in the Gaza Strip, including 3,900 children since the start of the war, that is October 7. Anti-government protesters came outside the residence of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in East Jerusalem this week. Antony Blinken, calls for humanitarian pause, but not for ceasefire at the moment. Now, let's have a look at what is that anti-government rally that is outside Netanyahu's residence. Anti-government protesters gathered outside Netanyahu's East Jerusalem residence. Many of them are carrying Israeli flags and shouting that Netanyahu should be jailed now. They demanded that he should resign over the handling of the October 7 terror attack by the Hamas. They were demanding an immediate ceasefire with the Hamas, declared as a militant group by the US, the UK, EU, and Germany, and many other countries. Anti-government demonstrations were also held in other Israeli cities like Tel Aviv, Haifa, Beersheba, and Eilat. Jews and Arab citizens are coming together in prayer room of a mosque to put an end to the war and as a sign of displaying solidarity among themselves. So these are new developments that is taking place within Israel. That means even Muslims and Jews, they are coming together. They're saying enough of war. We want peace now. Now, there has been call for ceasefire from different quarters. Let's have a look at that. The foreign ministers of Jordan and Egypt have called for ceasefire between the Hamas and Israel. These ministers spoke alongside Blinken after the talks between the US and Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, and United Arab Emirates, and senior Palestinian officials at the recently held Arab Summit this week. Egypt accused Israel of collective punishment of Palestinians in Gaza. Its foreign minister, Sameh Shokri, said that This cannot be a legitimate self-defense at all. Egypt emphasized an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire in Gaza without any conditions. The Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman al-Safadi clearly said that it was too early to discuss Gaza's post-war future before cessation of hostilities. The point is very clear. He said, first let's complete the war. Let's put an end to the war. Before we are completing the war or putting the war to an end, why are we discussing about what is going to happen after the war? To Safadi, murder and war crimes must stop, and Israel's immunity from international law must come to an end. The UAE, that is United Arab Emirates, has urged the US to call for immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Hamas. The UAE says that Israel's response to Hamas October 7 attack on Israel is disproportionate. It says Israel's policy of containment of Palestinian issue has failed. The UAE normalized its relations with Israel, and the US brokered Abraham Accords signed in 2020 along with Bahrain. Now it seems that normalized of relations has come to the same old cycle of violence. It's not going to be normalized very soon, looking at the complexities in Israel now. The Turkish President Erdogan said that it's using all diplomatic options to stop the bloodshed in the Gaza Strip, including talks with Israel's intelligence and its foreign ministry. Meanwhile, Turkey has recalled its ambassador from Israel for consultations. President Erdogan also said that Netanyahu is no longer an interlocutor for us in any sense. But he stated that this should not lead to complete severance of diplomatic ties with Israel. But let's see how Erdogan goes ahead. Meanwhile, Erdogan also criticized the Western countries for supporting Israel. He said Ankara is fast losing its trust on the European Union. To him, the aim of Turkey is to see peace in Gaza as a part of an independent Palestinian state in line with 1967 borders, with territorial integrity and with East Jerusalem as its capital. If it happens, it will be too good, but there's a long road to go. Bolivia has cut diplomatic ties with Israel. Jordan, Colombia, and Chile have recalled their envoys from Israel. The UN is horrified to see an Israeli attack on an ambulance this week in Gaza Strip. Now, friends, across the world, we have seen anti-war protesting, against Israel. And these protesters, they are all trying to, make a way for the Palestinians. Now, let's see what kind of anti-war protest that took place in Germany. Now, Germany has banned the Hamas as a terrorist outfit. Pro-Palestinian groups have taken out demonstrations in central Berlin this week. The demonstrations shouted slogans and brought placards with slogans like Save Gaza, Stop Genocide, and Ceasefire. The German security agencies fear tensions in the demonstrations following a ban on the activities linked to Hamas militant group and the Samidon Association that has been accused of celebrating the Hamas terror attack on South Israel on October 7. The German police said that they had to confiscate posters that brought the Holocaust to public and filed multiple cases of incitement of violence. In some cities like Düsseldorf, in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, so thousands coming out in the streets in support of Palestine. What is happening? Across the world, there has been support, the moves coming out, right, for Palestinian people. But what the US says now? The US is working hard with the Middle East countries to negotiate with the Hamas for releasing the rest of the hostages. Meanwhile, Blinken calls for humanitarian pause but opposed ceasefire with the Hamas. He's against ceasefire, saying that such an agreement would allow the Hamas time to regroup and carry out continued attack on Israel. He also said that both Washington and the Arab states believed that the status quo in the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip could not continue. He said he discussed with Shokri and Safadi, the foreign ministers of Egypt and Jordan, how to start a better path towards a two-state solution in Israel and Palestinian territories. Around the same time, the anti-war protesters, the stopped the US Senate hearing funding for Israel and shouted slogans like ceasefire now. That means anti-war protesters are disturbing Senate proceedings in the US. This week, even Washington DC witnessed a historic protest rally numbering more than 3 lakhs people marching on the White House, condemning President Joe Biden for funding genocide in Gaza. Now, friends, what Israel says. This week, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, together with its consulate in New York, organized a screening of atrocities by the Hamas for diplomats and ambassadors of different countries. The footage included graphic material like the record of many such killings. The screening was attended by ambassadors and diplomats from countries including the US, UK, France, Germany, Albania, Canada, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Cyprus, Greece, Guatemala, Hungary, Slovenia, Bulgaria, Poland, and Fiji, among others. Erdogan said that Israel will continue to present the atrocities committed by the Hamas Nazis against innocent civilians at the UN and to all the diplomats. In fact, it is very interesting and it must be noted by us that this Israeli ambassador to the UN, he is calling Hamas as Nazis now. He also said that Israel is fighting with a terrorist organization whose only goal is to destroy Israel. Israel's acting consul, Aviv Ezra, stated, "It is important that the world understands why it is critical to continue the operation until the Hamas threat is removed and the hostages are returned." Erdogan, the ambassador to the UN, has also called for the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, to resign after his remark on the UN Security Council. The UN Secretary General Guterres said that the October 7 terror attacks on Israel by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum, and that the Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. After, calling this statement, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, Mr. Erdogan, actually called for his resignation. Right. Now, what the UN says, the UN calls for immediate truce. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is as old as the establishment of the UN and the end of the Second World War. There has been a big divide at the UN, especially at the most powerful Security Council and at the General Assembly among various members in regard to appropriate action to be taken on Israel-Hamas war. The Security Council, wherein all the permanent 5 members, the US, the UK, France, Russia, and China, have got veto powers, are widely divided on the war. The Israeli ambassador, Erdogan, accused the UN system to be tilted against Israel and sympathetic to terrorism by Palestinians who are trying to eradicate his country. At one UN meeting, Erdogan was wearing a yellow star on his suit, making a reference to an identified measure against the Jews during the Holocaust in Germany during the Second World War. Craig Mokiber, a UN human rights official, wrote a letter to the UN. Very interesting letter, And that letter says that the world body has failed to stop what he called a textbook case of genocide against the Palestinian people. And interestingly, this war, letter has gone viral. So we all have come to know about the content of the letter now. Now, there is consistently an infighting at the UNSC. What is it? Initially, the Hamas attack on Israel shocked the UN. But the US demanded countries condemn Hamas by name, but some countries refused, opting for general condemnations of attack on civilians. Since the beginning of the conflict, the US and Russia quarreled over the text of the Security Council resolutions, each accusing other of bad faith. Members differed on whether to call for ceasefire, whether to give Israel the right to self-defense, or whether to even mention the attack on its statements. There has been a lot of confusion and chaos inside UN Security Council. From the beginning, the US is resisting the calls for ceasefire, saying that this would hamper Israel's ability to defend itself. However, the US has been supporting for a humanitarian pause, as I said. Russia and China have led the opposition to the US. So far, no resolution at the UNSC has passed the 15-member body, 5 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members. The Russia-backed resolutions have received very few votes. The US-backed resolution has received majority votes, but vetoed by Russia and China. And finally, a Brazil-led resolution has received enough votes, but unfortunately vetoed by the US. That's the current situation inside UN Security Council on the issue of Israel-Hamas war. Now, friends, finally, let's look at the deadlock at the United Nations General Assembly, that is UNGA. The UN General Assembly, UNGA, has 193 members. But the problem is that the big powers and members here do not have veto powers. Neither the small powers or small countries have veto powers at the UNGA. The UNGA has passed a non-binding resolution led by Jordan and other Arab nations that called for a humanitarian truce. It was supported by 121 members, 14 members have opposed it, and 44 members abstained from voting, including India. The US voted against it because the resolution failed to mention about the Hamas and the hostages. But the US allies like the UK and Australia have abstained from voting and not siding with the US. France supported the resolution. A Canadian amendment that would have addressed some of the US and Israel concerns have failed to pass. It must be noted here that the US-backed resolution against Russia's war in Ukraine unlikely got more than 140 votes, right? In comparison to what US is trying to do now for Israel. But now, Russia, after killing thousands of Ukrainian civilians since February 24, 2022, is now acting as the champion of human rights, blaming the US for the mess in the Middle East. So friends, let's look at the hypocrisy of these big powers. They are accusing each other for the mess. Neither Russia is right, neither US is right, neither Israel is right. All of them have their own problems and their interests. And finally, the innocent civilians in the Gaza Strip or in Palestine, they are suffering. They have been suffering for decades now. It's an age-old issue. And friends, I'll be bringing you a separate video or a lecture on India's stand on the issue definitely in this week itself. So friends, this is a very, very complicated issue. I have just given you an insight into so far what different countries are talking about, what kind of stance they are taking in either inside UNSC or at UN General Assembly. And also, I have brought you the opinion of the UN Secretary General in this serious matter. Friends, thank you once again for watching my channel. My humble request to you is that kindly subscribe, share, like, and just popularize the channel because your help is utmost necessary for me to grow. And I will assure you that I'll be bringing you the best of the videos in a very, very precise format. Right. Thank you so much once again. Bye bye.